The courtroom froze the moment the young mother whispered, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Her voice was barely louder than the hum of the overhead lights, yet every juror, every spectator leaned forward as if pulled by a string. A shopping cart filled with all her belongings sat parked outside the door, silent testimony that she had nowhere else to go. And then she said the one sentence that made Judge Judy rise from the bench and stop talking altogether. "But before we get into it, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe for more shocking courtroom moments." The metal wheels screeched as the bailiff dragged the rusted shopping cart across the polished courtroom floor. Every head turned, every whisper died. The cart wasn't evidence, it was everything she owned. Mara Ellis stood beside it, thin coat, tangled hair, half-broken sneakers, like someone who had already lived a lifetime before stepping into Judge Judy's courtroom. Yet something in her posture, a fragile thread of dignity, held her upright. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses, eyes cutting briefly toward the cart before landing on Mara. "Ms. Ellis," she said, voice firm but carrying an undertone even the audience could feel, curiosity. "State your name for the record." Mara swallowed, her throat tight. Mara Ellis." Her voice trembled, but not from fear of the courtroom. It was exhaustion, the kind that lived in the bones. Across the aisle, the plaintiff, Mr. Dockery, a stocky landlord with an inflated sense of self, smirked as if he'd already won. His crisp blazer looked even sharper in contrast to Mara's frayed sleeves. Judge Judy flipped through the file. "You're being sued for damage to a rented room and unpaid fees." She glanced up, eyebrow raised. "Is that correct?" Mara nodded slowly, eyes lowered. I didn't mean for anything to happen. I just didn't have anywhere else to go." The audience shifted. A few gasps, a few murmured comments. The presence of the cart told the story before she did. Dockery leaned forward, eager. "Your Honor, she destroyed my property because she refused to leave. I run a respectable place. She—" Judy lifted a hand. Silence snapped back instantly. "We'll get to you, sir. Right now, I'm talking to Ms. Ellis." Mara didn't look up. Her hands, small, cracked, trembling, gripped each other as if they were the only things that hadn't abandoned her. Judy softened her tone, just barely. "Ms. Ellis, do you understand why you're here today?" A long pause. Then Mara nodded again. But Judy could feel the weight of something unsaid, something simmering just beneath the surface, like a bruise beneath a sleeve. Her eyes flicked again to the cart. A child's blanket peeked out from underneath a stack of worn clothes, faded blue, covered in stars. "Ms. Ellis," Judge Judy leaned in, "where is your child now?" The question sliced through the stillness. Mara's breath hitched. She closed her eyes for a second, just long enough for pain to flicker across her face. When she opened them again, the courtroom lights reflected in the gloss of her tears, though none fell. "That's," her voice cracked, "that's why I'm here." The audience froze as Mara lifted her head, eyes finally meeting Judge Judy's. "I need to tell you what really happened." Mara gripped the edge of the witness stand so tightly her fingers blanched to white. One wrong word felt like it could shatter everything she had left, and Judge Judy could see it. The camera slowly tightened on Mara's face, catching every tremor beneath her eyes. Dockery, the plaintiff, leaned back smugly, arms folded as though waiting for his victory lap. But the tension around Mara shifted. Something inside her was slowly, painfully uncoiling. Judge Judy's voice came out gentle but firm. "Ms. Ellis, begin at the beginning. Not the lawsuit. Your beginning. How did you end up in that room?" Mara inhaled shakily. "My son and I, we were staying with someone who wasn't safe." Her lips tightened around the word safe as though it were foreign. A murmur rippled through the audience. She continued, eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. "I left with Jordan late one night. I didn't even grab all our things, just what I could carry. We didn't have anywhere to go, so I found the listing for Mr. Dockery's room. It was cheap. He said he didn't mind kids." Her voice shrank. "But he did." Dockery scoffed loudly. I didn't mind kids. I minded her. Judy snapped her gaze toward him. Sir, when I want commentary, I'll ask for it. Sit quietly. He sat, muttering under his breath. Mara went on. He started complaining about everything, the noise Jordan made, how long we stayed in the bathroom, if we microwaved food that smelled too strong. I tried to keep everything clean. I tried so hard. Judge Judy nodded, not interrupting. The quiet allowed Mara's story to stretch across the courtroom like a long shadow. And then, Mara whispered, he told me I was lucky he even rented to me, that other landlords wouldn't take someone like me. Her throat tightened. I knew I had to find a better place, but I lost my job a week after moving in. My ex found out where I worked and kept showing up. I had to choose between safety and income. The reality sat heavy in the air. Even Dockery's smugness faltered for a moment. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. And is that when things escalated? Mara nodded. Yes. When I fell behind on rent, Mr. Dockery told me he'd handle it his own way. He said if I didn't leave, he'd make sure I regretted staying. The plaintiff jolted up. She's lying. She's twisting everything. Sit down. Judy's tone had steel threaded through every syllable, but Dockery wasn't finished. He leaned forward, pointing at Mara with a cruel smile. Tell her why your kid isn't with you, Mara. Go on. Tell everyone the real reason. A gasp rippled through the room. Mara's hands dropped from the stand, fingers trembling violently as she whispered, You don't get to say his name. You don't get to tell that story. Judge Judy raised a single finger, a warning. A line Dockery was seconds away from crossing. The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence. Even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to dim under the gravity of that gesture. Mara stood frozen, the defendant's taunt echoing through her ribs like a blow she couldn't brace for. Judge Judy's voice cut through the air, sharp, controlled, unmistakably protective. Mr. Dockery, you will not weaponize this courtroom. One more interruption, and you'll be removed. Dockery sank back into his seat, face burning, but his eyes still glittered with a vindictive confidence. He believed he held the winning card, Mara's greatest wound. Judy turned back to Mara, the edges of her demeanor softening. Ms. Ellis, you mentioned earlier that what happened with your child is why you're here. I need the truth, not for him. She nodded toward Dockery. But for the court. Mara's throat tightened. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if bracing against an invisible wind. My son, Jordan. Her voice cracked. She swallowed, trying again. Jordan was taken by CPS for temporary placement. The audience reacted, some with pity, others with judgment. The camera closed in on Mara's trembling hands. Judy remained steady. Why? Mara exhaled slowly, painfully. There was a disturbance. The night I left my ex, he followed us. He started pounding on the door of the room we were renting, yelling, threatening. Her voice thinned to a thread. Someone called the police. When they came, they saw we had nowhere safe to go. They made the call. But, she rushed out, desperate to reclaim dignity, I've done everything they asked, every meeting, every requirement, every single thing. For the first time, Judge Judy saw something new in her eyes, not just fear, but fight. Dockery rolled his eyes loudly enough to be audible. Yeah, sure. If she tried half as hard to keep the room clean as she does spinning stories. Enough. Judy didn't raise her voice, but the word cracked like a gavel. Mara glared at Dockery, a spark igniting. You know exactly why that room looked the way it did. A ripple of tension shot across the courtroom. Judy's eyes narrowed. Ms. Ellis, what do you mean by that? Mara's breathing became shallow, her shoulders tense, like she was standing at the edge of a confession she wasn't sure she could survive. She looked at Judge Judy, then at Dockery, then back down at her trembling hands. Dockery straightened in his seat, suddenly attentive. Mara lifted her gaze with a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. What happened in that room? It wasn't just mess. It wasn't just damage. It was fear. It was pressure. It was him. She pointed, hand shaking, straight at the plaintiff. Mara's voice broke into a whisper that hit harder than a scream. He made sure it looked like I was unfit, because he wanted something from me. Judge Judy leaned forward, elbows on the bench, eyes narrowing with surgical precision. She had seen arrogance before, but in Dockery's stare, she saw something else. A crack, a flicker, a truth trying not to surface. The camera shifted to Dockery, catching the sudden rigidity in his jaw. Mara's trembling accusation still hovered in the air, electric and heavy. The room waited. Audience, cameras, even the bailiff, as if bracing for what Judy already sensed. This was no ordinary landlord-tenant dispute. "Ms. Ellis," Judy said slowly, "clarify what you meant. What did he want from you?" Mara looked down again, as though the memory itself weighed her head. "When I fell behind on rent, he came into the room without knocking, more than once." Dockery jolted. "I was checking on damages. The smell in that room—" "Hush!" Judy commanded, without even looking at him. Mara continued, her voice growing softer. "He told me he could work something out if I spent more time with him. Alone." Her breath trembled. "He said he knew people at CPS. He said he could make things easier. Or harder." Judy's gaze sharpened. "Did he make any explicit threats?" Mara hesitated, just long enough for Dockery to shift uneasily. "He said," she whispered, "that mothers lose custody every day, especially if the wrong person said the wrong thing." The audience reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, a rising wave of disbelief. The camera zoomed in on Dockery's face, catching the microsecond flash of panic before he forced a sneer back into place. "That is ridiculous," Dockery snapped, but his voice had lost its earlier swagger. "She's twisting my words. She was a terrible tenant. I was helping her, trying to give her chances others wouldn't." Judy finally met his eyes head on. "Mr. Dockery, I've been doing this a long time, and you just described yourself like a man polishing his own halo." Laughter flickered through the audience, but Judy held up a hand. The room snapped silent. "Mara," she said, voice steady, "you said there was a reason the room looked the way it did. Explain." Mara reached slowly into the pocket of her coat. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to reveal. "I kept notes," she whispered. "Every time he came by, every time he made comments, every time he threatened to report me." Dockery barked a laugh. "Oh, please, notes! What is this, a diary?" Mara didn't even look at him. She pulled out a small, battered notebook, the cover torn, edges frayed, pages bent from rain and nights spent sleeping outdoors. The camera caught Judge Judy's reaction. A flicker of intrigue, followed by something colder, calculation. Mara placed the notebook on the bench with a soft thud that echoed louder than Dockery's laughter ever could. She met Judy's gaze for the first time with steady eyes. "I wrote everything down, because I knew no one would believe me." The notebook landed on Judge Judy's bench with a sound that didn't match its size. It was soft, but final, like a truth too long buried finally taking its first breath. Judge Judy reached for it slowly, the room holding still as if afraid a sudden movement might shatter the fragile courage Mara had just displayed. The notebook was worn, soaked edges, rain-streaked ink, pages that looked as though they had survived storms both literal and emotional. Dockery scoffed, but his voice wavered. "That's nothing but her journal. She writes fantasies. That doesn't make them true." Judy didn't acknowledge him. She flipped open the first page. Every line was handwritten in small, careful letters. Dates, times, descriptions, some entries neat, others smeared, by rain or tears. Mara stood silently, eyes fixed on the notebook as though watching her own heart laid bare on a table. Judy studied an early entry. "He came again today, told me I should be grateful, told me women like me don't get many chances. Jordan was asleep. I prayed he wouldn't wake up until Mr. Dockery left." The courtroom reacted in a wave of sharp breaths. Another entry. "He said if I didn't try harder to keep the room presentable, he'd call CPS. I cleaned for hours, but the fear made my hands shake and I dropped things. He laughed when he saw the mess." Judy closed the notebook for a moment, her jaw tightening. Dockery shot up defensively. "She's lying. Anyone can write anything in some ratty little notebook. This proves nothing. But Judy reopened it, this time with purpose. She flipped to entries matching the dates Dockery listed in his complaint, and the room shifted. Slowly, dangerously. "Mara," she said, eyes narrowing, "these entries correspond with the nights the police were called for disturbances." Mara nodded faintly. "He would yell outside the door, pound on it. Sometimes he'd come in without knocking. I wrote everything down because I was scared no one would believe me." Dockery fumbled for composure. "She's manipulating—" "Stop talking." Judy's voice cracked like thunder. She turned to Mara again. "These entries, they're detailed, chronological, and your handwriting is consistent throughout." Mara swallowed hard. "I didn't have anything else, Your Honor. No camera, no phone. Only this." The vulnerability in her voice pierced the tension like a needle through cloth. Suddenly Judge Judy closed the notebook and set it aside. Not dismissively, carefully. "Mr. Dockery," she said, eyes sharp as cut glass, "your version of events is unraveling." Dockery opened his mouth, but no words came. Judy leaned back. "This notebook may not be a perfect form of evidence, but it is consistent, and your statements are not." The audience murmured, energy rising, sensing the scales shifting for the first time. Judy tapped her pen against the bench. "There's someone else who needs to speak before I form conclusions." The clerk straightened, anticipating her command. She looked toward the courtroom door. "Bring in the neighbor," Judge Judy said. "The one who called the police that night." The side door creaked open, and a timid figure stepped inside, eyes downcast, shoulders curled inward. She looked as though just crossing the threshold had cost her a night's sleep. Dockery shifted in his seat, visibly rattled. The neighbor, Ms. Harper, moved slowly toward the witness stand, clutching her purse as if it were a life raft. She was thin, middle-aged, with worry lines etched deep across her forehead. Her gaze never once drifted toward Dockery. Judge Judy watched her carefully. "Ms. Harper, thank you for coming. Please, take a seat." Ms. Harper nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." The courtroom felt tighter now, as though the walls themselves leaned in to listen. "Ms. Harper," Judy began, "you were the one who contacted the police the night of the disturbance at Mr. Dockery's property?" "Yes," she said. Her fingers twisted around each other. I heard yelling. A lot of it. And pounding on the door. It didn't sound right." Mara stiffened beside her cart, memories flooding her face. "And what did you see?" Judy pressed. Ms. Harper hesitated, swallowing. Mr. Dockery was standing outside Ms. Ellis's room. He looked angry. Not landlord angry. More like— Her voice trailed off. "Say it," Judy encouraged gently. "Like he was trying to force his way in," she whispered. A ripple of gasps filled the courtroom. Dockery erupted. "That is a lie! I was checking on noise complaints. She's exaggerating because she hates me." Judy's glare silenced him instantly. Ms. Harper continued, now speaking a little faster, as though releasing something she had held far too long. "He would go to her door at odd hours. Late, sometimes very late. And she always sounded scared." Mara's eyes glistened, but she stayed silent. "Did you witness Mr. Dockery entering the room?" Judy asked. Ms. Harper nodded faintly. "Once. He didn't knock. She was yelling at him to leave her alone." The room tensed. Dockery's face flushed red. "She's misremembering—" Judy cut him off. "Mr. Dockery, one more interruption and I will clear you from this courtroom." He sank back, jaw clenched. The camera zoomed in on Ms. Harper's trembling hands. She pressed them flat on the stand, summoning courage. "There's something else," she said, breath hitching. "Something I didn't tell the police." The audience held its breath. Even the bailiff stopped moving. Judy leaned forward. "Go on." Ms. Harper's eyes lifted for the first time, straight toward Mara, filled with apology, with guilt, with truth. "That night," she said softly, "I saw your little boy, Jordan." Mara's hand flew to her mouth. "He was in the hallway," Ms. Harper whispered, "hiding behind the stairs, crying, terrified." She paused, trembling. "And he wasn't scared of you." Her gaze drifted slowly, reluctantly, to Dockery. He was scared of him. A collective gasp rose like a wave. Ms. Harper squeezed her eyes shut and added, "And that's not all. There's something else I never told anyone." Ms. Harper's final words hung in the air like a draft from an open door, cold, unsettling, impossible to ignore. Mara blinked rapidly, tears catching the courtroom lights. Dockery, for the first time, looked genuinely afraid. Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply watched Ms. Harper with the kind of silence that demanded the truth continue spilling. "Ms. Harper," Judy said softly, "tell the court what else you witnessed." The woman swallowed, glancing briefly at Dockery before looking down at her hands. I saw Mr. Dockery talking to the boy, Jordan, not yelling, not threatening, whispering." The room stiffened. "What did he say?" Judy asked. Ms. Harper shook her head. "I couldn't hear all of it, but I remember one sentence because it made my stomach twist." Her voice fell to a fragile whisper. "He told the boy, 'Your mom causes problems. You should stay away from people like her.'" A shudder moved through the audience. Mara staggered back a step, gripping the handle of her shopping cart for balance. Dockery sputtered, "That's taken out of context. The kid was crying. I was calming him down." Judy's eyebrow arched with slow, dangerous precision. "Calming him down by telling him his mother is a problem?" You're twisting it," Dockery barked, sweating now. But Ms. Harper wasn't done. "There was something else," she said, voice trembling. "After the police left, I saw Mr. Dockery again. He was carrying a trash bag from Mara's room." Mara's eyes widened. You were watching." Ms. Harper nodded apologetically. "I was worried. Something felt wrong. And when he dumped the bag into the outside bin, I saw things inside it. Not trash." She hesitated. "Food, clothes, toys." Mara let out a strangled sound. "Jordan's toys?" Dockery's face turned the color of a warning light. "That's ridiculous. I was cleaning garbage. The room was a disaster." Ms. Harper shook her head. "No. I remember seeing a little blue truck in the bag. And a drawing. A picture of you and Jordan." She looked at Mara with a pained expression. It wasn't trash. The entire courtroom felt the shift. A pressure drop. A quiet inhalation before the storm. Mara's knees buckled slightly before she steadied herself. Why would you take those things? Why would you throw them away?" Dockery slammed his hands on the table. "Because you left them everywhere. Because... But his voice faltered when he realized the eyes in the room no longer judged Mara. They judged him. Judge Judy leaned forward, her tone deadly calm. "Mr. Dockery, you don't seem to understand the danger of your behavior. Removing a child's belongings tied to stability, comfort, and memory." "It was my property," Dockery snapped. "I can do what I want in my building." "No," Judy said sharply. "Not when the act is coercive. Not when it's vindictive. Not when it's intended to frighten a mother already struggling to protect her child." Dockery froze. Mara, trembling, found her voice, barely above a whisper. "He tried to take everything that made Jordan feel safe. He wanted control. He wanted us scared." Judy's expression darkened, as if absorbing the final piece of a puzzle she'd been assembling since Mara walked in. Mara's voice cracked as she spoke the truth she had been holding back. "He tried to take my son, and that night was only the beginning." Judge Judy rose slowly from her bench, an action so rare that even the bailiff stiffened. The courtroom felt suddenly smaller, the air denser, as if the truth itself were pressing against the walls. Dockery's confidence drained drop by drop. Judy stepped closer, her voice controlled, but carrying the weight of years spent decoding lies. "Ms. Ellis," she said, eyes never leaving Dockery's shaken posture, "you said that night was only the beginning. I want you to explain." Mara swallowed. Her breathing wavered as she steadied herself on the edge of her battered shopping cart. "He didn't just frighten us," she said. He didn't just threaten CPS. He told me that if I didn't cooperate, he'd make sure people thought I was a danger to my son. A wave of outrage swept through the audience. Dockery sputtered. That is absolutely false. Judy cut him off with a single raised hand. Not another word. Mara looked down, voice softening. Jordan started sleeping in his shoes. He'd ask me if we had to run again, and every time Mr. Dockery came by, he'd hide under the bed. She paused. He never used to be afraid of people. The words struck the courtroom with a physical force. Judy's jaw set. Mr. Dockery, you're being accused of behavior that directly contributed to a child's trauma. How do you respond? She's exaggerating. I was trying to help them get their act together. She's unstable. The footage says otherwise, Judy snapped. The clerk stepped forward with a remote. On the side screen, grainy security footage flickered to life, showing Dockery in the hallway that very morning, just hours before the hearing. He blocked Mara's path. He leaned in close, his face twisted into something predatory. There was no audio, but the body language spoke loudly enough to silence the room. Dockery paled. This is out of context. She was late. I was telling her. Sit down, Judy ordered. He sat, because for the first time, he had nothing to stand on. Judy turned to Mara again. Ms. Ellis, what did he say to you in that moment? Mara wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture, a haunted one. He told me, she whispered, that if I didn't drop the complaints I made to the shelter workers, I'd lose Jordan forever. That a homeless mother with a temper won't stand a chance. Judy's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something colder, conviction. Dockery flailed. She's lying. She's manipulating everyone. She's good at playing the victim. But no one reacted. His words fell flat, because everyone had seen the truth on the screen. Judy exhaled slowly, her mind connecting pieces like a puzzle snapping into place. This changes everything, she murmured. She nodded to the clerk. Rewind the footage to the beginning. I need to see something. The screen blinked, backward, frame by frame. Just before the moment Dockery confronted Mara, a shadowy figure stepped briefly into view. Judge Judy leaned in, eyes narrowing. Who, she said softly, is that? The lights dimmed slightly as the courtroom screen flickered back to life, casting a pale glow across every tense face. This time, no one spoke. Even Dockery stopped breathing through his protests, because the truth was about to speak for him. Judge Judy folded her hands, gaze razor-sharp. Play it, she instructed. The footage rewound to the moment before Dockery confronted Mara. Grainy, slightly distorted, but unmistakable. A hallway lined with peeling wallpaper. Mara walking with her head down, Dockery lurking just around the corner. And then, a shadow. A sliver of movement. Someone stepping out just long enough to be caught on camera. The camera zoomed in. The courtroom leaned forward as one. A neighbor, another tenant, a stranger? The figure lingered for a half-second before slipping away. But the posture, the shape, the nervous glance over the shoulder. It wasn't random. Judge Judy nodded to the clerk. Hold that frame. The image froze. Dockery in the foreground, Mara 10 feet away, and the shadowed figure behind him, watching, listening. Ms. Ellis, Judy said, do you recognize this person? Mara squinted at the screen. Her breath faltered. I think that's the building manager, Mr. Clay. Dockery's face drained of all remaining color. Judy pounced. The building manager? The one who filed the written statement supporting your claim, Mr. Dockery? Dockery stammered. That could be anyone. It's blurry. It's... Clerk, Judy said. Play the rest. The footage continued. Dockery stepping toward Mara, blocking her path. His gestures aggressive, wide. Mara retreating. The shadowed figure, Mr. Clay, watching from a distance, then pulling out his phone. Judge Judy caught it instantly. There, freeze. The frame stopped with Mr. Clay's arm raised, phone glowing faintly in the dim hall. Zoom in. The glow sharpened. A timestamp appeared. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judy lifted a hand. Silence fell immediately. Mr. Dockery, she said, her voice low, controlled and lethal. You told this court you had no communication with your building manager that morning, yet here he is, filming or photographing your interaction with Ms. Ellis. Dockery swallowed hard. That doesn't prove anything. Judy's eyes burned with certainty. No, but it proves coordination. It proves he was ready to document an interaction before it even happened. Which means this confrontation wasn't spontaneous, it was staged. Mara covered her mouth, tears pooling. Not from sadness, but from validation. Your Honor, the clerk said suddenly, there's more. The footage advanced, showing Clay typing on his phone moments after recording. Pull phone records, Judy ordered. Check who he contacted at that exact time. The clerk already had the printout. Judge, the record shows he contacted Mr. Dockery. The courtroom gasped so loudly it echoed off the walls. Judy turned slowly to Dockery, eyes cold as steel. This was not a landlord protecting property, she said. This was a coordinated intimidation effort. Dockery opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came. Judy looked back at the timestamp and said, these messages were sent minutes before CPS received an anonymous call about Ms. Ellis. She turned to Dockery. Are you ready to explain that? Dockery's face was a collapsing mask. Anger melting into panic, panic hardening into something feral. The courtroom could feel it. The moment a liar realizes the walls aren't just closing in, they're already touching his shoulders. Judge Judy straightened, the authority in her posture unmistakable. Mr. Dockery, the timestamp places your building manager's message to you. She tapped the paper. Minutes before CPS received an anonymous call reporting Ms. Ellis as unstable. Explain that. Dockery's mouth opened and closed, like someone drowning above the surface. That proves nothing, he sputtered. Clay was just keeping me updated. The CPS call could have come from anyone. Mara let out a quiet, involuntary sob. Not of pain, of recognition. The truth was finally standing beside her instead of across from her. Enough, Judge Judy said, voice slicing through Dockery's excuses. You have been interrupting, deflecting, and contradicting yourself since this hearing began. And now we have a pattern of behavior. Harassment, threats, coercion, and corroboration from a witness. Dockery's veneer cracked. She's lying. They're all lying. She's unstable, Your Honor. She lost her kid. I was trying to help her. Judy's eyes hardened. You do not get to weaponize this mother's hardship. Sit down. He didn't. He took a step forward, breath ragged. You don't understand. She was ruining everything. The other tenants were complaining. My reputation. Your reputation, Judy repeated, incredulous. Your concern is your reputation, not the truth, not this child's well-being? The tension surged, filling the room like rising smoke. Mara finally spoke, small, trembling. Jordan was getting better. Until that night. After Mr. Dockery threatened me, he wouldn't sleep unless he was touching my arm. He kept asking if the angry man was coming back. Judy's jaw clenched. Ms. Ellis, you mentioned earlier that you thought you might lose your son for good. Why? Mara closed her eyes as if reliving the fear. Because I thought Mr. Dockery would call CPS again. He told me he could make a report look real. He said no one would believe a homeless mother with no family. Every person in the audience froze. The humanity of her confession struck like a tremor. Dockery snapped. The last shred of self-control evaporated. Of course I said that, he shouted. Look at her life. Look where she is. Someone had to put pressure on her to change. The courtroom exploded in gasps. Judge Judy slammed her gavel so forcefully the sound ricocheted off the walls. You just admitted to coercion on the record. You have crossed every possible boundary of decency, legality, and morality. Dockery blanched, realizing too late what he'd confessed. The bailiff stepped closer, just in case. Judy lowered her voice to a deadly calm. We are no longer dealing with property damage. We are dealing with manipulation, intimidation, and intentional destabilization of a vulnerable mother and her child. Dockery whispered, You're twisting everything. No, Judy replied. You did that yourself. She turned to the clerk. Bring in the CPS liaison. Mara's breath caught in her throat. Judge Judy softened her tone only for Mara. "We're going to get to the bottom of what happened to your son." The side door opened, and a calm, soft-spoken woman stepped inside, holding a slim folder stamped CPS. Confidential. Her presence altered the air instantly. This was no longer just testimony. This was the truth arriving with paperwork. The CPS liaison, Ms. Davenport, took the stand with practiced composure. She greeted Judge Judy with a respectful nod, then glanced at Mara, offering a small, reassuring smile that nearly buckled the young mother's composure. "Ms. Davenport," Judy began, "you've reviewed Ms. Ellis's case thoroughly?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied. "I've personally handled her file for the past 3 months." Mara blinked rapidly. She hadn't known that. Something warm flickered in her expression, a brief spark of being seen. "Proceed," Judy instructed. Ms. Davenport opened the folder. "First, I want to state clearly, Ms. Ellis has been compliant with every single requirement placed upon her. Meetings, evaluations, home checks, she has not missed one." A stunned hush fell across the courtroom. Dockery scoffed under his breath. "Of course she showed up. She's trying to look good." But this time, even he seemed to regret speaking. Ms. Davenport continued, "Second, CPS has documented significant effort on Ms. Ellis's part to regain stability despite her circumstances. She has consistently shown a protective, nurturing relationship with her son." Mara's chin quivered, hope flickering like a candle in a storm. Judge Judy nodded. "And the anonymous report? The one that triggered the temporary removal?" The liaison's expression tightened. "Yes, Your Honor. That call alleged Ms. Ellis was using substances, had violent outbursts, and posed immediate danger to her child." The audience gasped. Mara flinched as though struck. "But," Ms. Davenport said firmly, "none of those claims were substantiated, not one." Judy folded her hands, eyes sharp. "When exactly was this anonymous call made?" Ms. Davenport read from the file. 10:42 p.m., 2 nights before the disturbance Ms. Harper described. The timing hit the room like a dropped gavel. "And," the liaison added, "CPS launched a follow-up review because we found inconsistencies in the caller's statements." Judy leaned forward. "Meaning?" Ms. Davenport took a breath. "Meaning the caller seemed unusually familiar with Ms. Ellis's schedule, her son's routines, and the exact nights she received eviction warnings." Dockery shifted. Sweat began collecting along his temples. Judy's gaze sharpened, predatory, knowing. "And did CPS trace the origin of that call?" Ms. Davenport nodded, slowly, gravely. "Yes, Your Honor, we traced it to a prepaid cell phone that had made only 3 calls in its entire use." She locked eyes with the judge. 2 to CPS, and 1 to Mr. Dockery's personal number. The courtroom detonated into stunned gasps. Mara gripped the bench, breath stolen from her lungs, Dockery's face drained to ghostly white. That doesn't mean it was me. Lots of people could have—" Ms. Davenport cut him off gently. "The phone was activated using the same credit card Mr. Dockery uses to pay his property utilities." Silence. Crushing. Undeniable. Judge Judy slowly stood. "Mr. Dockery," she said, voice like a blade, "you didn't just intimidate this mother. You orchestrated the report that took her child." The printed phone records lay on Judge Judy's bench like a freshly unearthed weapon, cold, undeniable, and aimed straight at the man who thought he was untouchable. Dockery's breathing turned shallow. The audience's eyes burned into him like a jury he never expected to face. Judge Judy lifted the pages with slow, deliberate precision, the rustle of paper somehow louder than the murmurs rippling through the room. "Mr. Dockery," she said, "these phone records show the prepaid phone used to report Ms. Ellis, to destroy Ms. Ellis, was purchased with your card, activated with your information, used to call your number." Her gaze didn't blink. "This is not coincidence. This is malice." Dockery lurched forward, gripping the edge of the defendant's table as if the wood could save him from drowning. It's fraud. Someone stole my identity. You don't know—" "Stop." Judy's voice flattened into something colder than anger. Certainty. Mara stood frozen, one hand pressed to her mouth, knees trembling. The truth she'd feared for months, now finally spoken aloud, felt both vindicating and devastating. Tears welled but didn't fall. Even they seemed suspended in disbelief. Judge Judy continued, voice unwavering. CPS doesn't get involved lightly. They don't remove children on whims or rumors. But you, Mr. Dockery, you created a situation engineered to make Ms. Ellis look unstable, to isolate her, to break her. He shook his head violently. No, she's manipulating you. She manipulates everyone. She's. Judy leaned forward. A mother fighting to protect her child. Meanwhile, you've been fighting to destroy her. Why? The question hit him like a punch. Dockery's mouth snapped shut. His eyes darted wildly, toward the door, toward Mara, toward the camera, as if searching for a version of reality that could still excuse him. Judy pressed, softer but sharper. What did you gain from taking her child? From poisoning CPS against her? From controlling her with fear? The silence that followed was suffocating. Dockery's voice broke, shredded and angry. Because she wouldn't listen, she wouldn't respect me. I tried to offer her help, gave her chances, and she threw them back in my face. So you tried to take her son away? Judy fired back, her voice rising like a storm. No, Dockery yelled, but too late. The truth had already poured out between the cracks of his rage. I wanted her to realize she needed me. Mara's breath hitched, pure horror, pure clarity. Judy lowered the records, now holding them like a verdict. You weaponized Child Protective Services to control a homeless mother. That is cruelty, that is manipulation, and that, she pointed a finger directly at him, is abuse of power. The courtroom erupted in whispers that felt like thunder. Dockery's shoulders sagged, the collapse beginning from the inside out. But then he snapped back up, eyes wild. He jabbed a shaking finger at Mara. She didn't tell you everything either. The room fell silent again. Judy slowly turned her head. Ms. Ellis, she said carefully, is there something you haven't shared with this court? Mara froze, her face drained of all color. Dockery leaned forward, voice dripping venom. Tell her about the night you disappeared and left your kid alone. Mara's breath caught mid-inhale, frozen, as if the entire courtroom had tilted beneath her feet. Dockery's accusation wasn't just a strike, it was a wound ripped open. Judge Judy watched her carefully, not with suspicion, but with a solemn invitation. Tell the truth. Mara's hands trembled as she lifted them from the cart handle. There was no defiance in her posture, only the heavy, exhausted weight of someone who has run out of places to hide. Judy spoke gently but firmly. Ms. Ellis, this court needs the truth from you. What happened that night? Silence spread like a held breath. Mara finally exhaled, voice barely audible. I didn't disappear. Not the way he's trying to make it sound. Dockery leaned forward with predatory satisfaction. Judy didn't even look his way. Mara blinked rapidly, gathering strength from somewhere impossibly deep. That night, Jordan and I arrived at the shelter, but they were full. No beds, no floor space. They turned us away. Her voice cracked on away. I begged, she whispered. I had nowhere else to go. Jordan was already half asleep in my arms, and they still said no. A few people in the gallery wiped their eyes. Judge Judy's expression softened almost imperceptibly. So what did you do? Mara swallowed hard. I walked, for hours, all night. I couldn't carry him anymore, so at one point I sat him on a bench under a street lamp. He fell asleep instantly. Her lips quivered. I wrapped him in his blanket and went to look for food. The room went utterly still. How far did you go? Judy asked gently. Not far, Mara said quickly, desperately. I never went out of sight of the bench. I had no money. I hoped maybe I'd find someone closing up a cafe, someone throwing away day-old bread, that's all. Tears streamed down her cheeks now, unstoppable. Dockery pounced. She left him, alone in the street. Mara's head snapped toward him, pain hardened into a mother's fury. I never left him alone. I never left his sight, and when I came back, her voice broke. He was still sleeping, right where I left him, Still safe. The courtroom absorbed the image, a mother so desperate she had to choose between hunger and custody, between survival and scrutiny. Judy nodded slowly. Why didn't you tell the court this sooner? Mara looked down, a tear dropping onto her sleeve. Because people think homelessness means failure. I thought if I told the truth, they'd see me as unfit. I was afraid the truth would cost me my son. The vulnerability in her voice cracked something in the room, a collective ache. Judge Judy leaned forward, speaking with quiet force. Ms. Ellis, truth does not make you unfit, it makes you human. Dockery scoffed loudly, but no one followed, not even the gallery. His power was slipping like sand through shaking hands. Judy's gaze sharpened toward him. Mr. Dockery, your attempt to twist this mother's desperation into neglect is manipulative and cruel. Mara wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, standing straighter now. I wasn't perfect, but I never abandoned my son. Her voice trembled, but didn't break. Judge Judy's tone dropped into a deeper, almost reverent seriousness. Ms. Ellis, something tells me this is not the only truth you've been carrying. Mara's last words, I never abandoned my son, echoed long after her voice stopped. Not one person moved, and for the first time in the entire hearing, Judge Judy didn't speak. The silence wasn't hesitation. It was impact. Judy's eyes lingered on Mara, studying the woman not as a case file, not as a defendant, but as a mother stretched thin across a system that had never once cushioned her fall. That quiet hung heavier than any gavel swing. Finally, Judy inhaled, slow, steady, almost pained. Ms. Ellis, she said softly, you have carried a burden no one in this courtroom can fully comprehend. Mara blinked, startled by the shift in tone. It wasn't pity, it wasn't sympathy, it was recognition. Judy looked down at the notebook, the phone records, the CPS file. Threads of a story Mara had never intended to tell, woven together only because her silence had become too heavy to hold. You didn't hide this out of deceit, Judy continued. You hid it because you believed the truth would condemn you. She paused. But the only thing the truth condemns is the system that failed you long before today. Dockery scoffed loudly, trying to claw back relevance. Oh, give me a break. She's just playing the victim now that she's cornered. Judy turned to him so sharply he flinched. You have said enough. Her voice dropped to a cold, unwavering command. You disrespect this court every time you open your mouth. The audience murmured, soft, righteous approval. Mara wiped a tear from her cheek, though more gathered faster than she could catch them. I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't take care of him, she whispered. Jordan is all I have, and I've been trying so hard. Judy's expression softened with a humanity rarely seen on camera. Trying is not failure. Surviving is not failure. And motherhood is not measured by a single desperate night. The camera zoomed in on Mara's face, capturing the moment her defenses, built from necessity, layered in shame, finally cracked open. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in relief. For months, she had been told she was unstable, irresponsible, dangerous. Today, for the first time, someone with power was saying she was none of those things. Ms. Harper, still seated at the witness stand, dabbed her eyes. Even the bailiff shifted, a rare flicker of emotion breaking through his practiced stoicism. Dockery attempted one last strike.